Busboys and Poets and have this chance to bring our speaking tour to you. We've come from New York, then to Vermont, then here, because we wanted to address and learn about the Leahy Law and how what happened to Abir Aramin might be brought before our elected officials. Bassam Aramin is a co-founder with that whole group of 7 or so that brought together Combatants for Peace. His day job has him working at the Palestinian Archives, and he's also the director of the Center for Democracy and Dialogue. Yonatan Shapira, as you've heard, is one of the pilots that said that signed the pilot's letter saying they would refuse to do this anymore. He's now in New York City finishing his thesis about conflict resolution. It was a Rotary funded scholarship that helped him with that paper, but he's also flying helicopters in the United States to monitor power lines and things like that since he lost his Air Force job in Israel. So with that, let me welcome Bassam Aramin as our first speaker.
I'm very happy to be with you tonight. And me and Yonatan prefer to sit here, not on these chairs, not to look like the corruption liar politician during the election. We have only the truth and our real story, our experience. I'll start in 2005, in January, we found ourselves involved in Combatants for Peace, this young, courage, moral organization with 4 Palestinian and 7 Israelis. The Israeli side, people who served the occupation and torture the Palestinian in the occupied territories, then they realized that they are just occupiers. Just make suffering to the Palestinian and create more enemies in the Palestinian side. And the Palestinian side, people like me, I spent 7 years in the Israeli jails when I was 17, people who spent many years from their life in the Israeli jails, and realized that this conflict cannot be solved in a military solution. Then we ask why we are dying. We must have the courage to say that loudly. We change our mind. We refuse to be enemy, and we can live together in this land. We have many principles in our organization. We are committed to non-violent struggle jointly, Palestinian and Israeli, against our common enemy. It's the occupation. And we start our activities in both sides, Palestinian and Israeli, giving lectures to both sides. We saw that the people encourage us and want to join our organization. Our idea is very great and very courage. We see the people very thirsty to have any solution. All of them want to live in peace. The people who pay the price, just the civilians from both sides, and our kids especially. In 2007, 16th of January, that black day in my life changed my life totally and my family's life when an Israeli soldier shot and killed my Abir. She was 10 years old after she finished her examination in front of her school with rubber bullet. After 3 days, Abir died. And after 3 days, the Israeli police opened investigation. And after 3 months, closed the file because they are not involved in this incident.
Thank you very much for being here with us today. We don't feel that we have a very strong opposition in this room. So it's relaxing and it's nice to be among friends. If there are, please do participate and ask us hard questions later. But yeah, it's been a long day. We've been meeting with these officials in the State Department, and it's kind of weird to meet these people when you know that at the same time that they are nice to you and listening to your stories and maybe try even to help, they are part of the system that makes this world so brutal and ugly and make this brutal occupation of Palestine and these horrible occupations in Iraq and in other places going on. So we don't feel that we have to convince you today that it's good that I refused to be part of these war crimes, and it's good that Bassam is struggling for liberating Palestinians. But maybe we can help each other later when we get to the question and answer, having better ideas how can we continue this struggle. Because while we are sitting here, as you know, in Israel, the government is sitting and finding a solution how to cut the electricity from Gaza or things like that. And the situation on the ground is a catastrophe. Abir is one of more than 970 Palestinian children that were killed from the beginning of the Second Intifada in 2000. And none of them was brought to justice. We have no convictions in these crimes that were made. And just to give you one example of one of the cases that we are talking about in the Israeli side, I will tell you about my young brother. He was a fighter. He was a soldier in the ground forces, and he fought in the Second Intifada, completely convinced that he's protecting us Israelis. What happened to him that led him eventually to understand that he cannot do it anymore was when they were laying somewhere in the West Bank, waiting for Palestinians to arrive while other units entered the Palestinian village to arrest some suspects. And they had an order to shoot this jeep of Palestinian policemen that someone thought that will interrupt the operation. And they killed 5 Palestinian policemen. Later on, they found, of course, or not of course, that none of them even had a weapon. And he was laying all the night in this position next to the body of one of these Palestinian policemen. And somehow he saw his ID and he saw his name. And 3 weeks later, he heard about a suicide bomb happened in some of the cities in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, killing many Israeli civilians. And that was done by the cousin of this policeman. And if you don't have understanding about the reality, I think this is a good example of this circle of revenge. And now my young brother is the coordinator of the Israeli part of Combatants for Peace, and he's active day and night to stop this brutal occupation. And it's just one example. We have more than 450 ex-fighters, ex-prisoners, and ex-soldiers, and we are all committed not just to sit with each other and discuss and tell stories and dialogue and reconciliation and cure our own wounds. We are committed to the struggle, and we are struggling for Palestinian liberation as well, for liberating the Israelis from being oppressors, from being occupiers. And we will not stop until we reach this point that Palestine will be free.